The moment loneliness stops hurting, something far more dangerous begins. Because pain is supposed to warn you. Pain is your nervous system sounding an alarm that something essential is missing. When that alarm goes silent, it doesn't mean the problem is gone. It usually means your brain has adapted to the absence. And adaptation can look a lot like peace. But there's a question hiding inside that silence, a question most people never ask. Why does the loneliness suddenly feel normal? Not peaceful, not fulfilling, just normal. There's a reason that shift happens, and it has almost nothing to do with becoming emotionally strong. It has everything to do with survival. Your nervous system is built to detect threats. Rejection, isolation, exclusion. Your brain processes these experiences using the same neural pathways that respond to physical pain. Neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger demonstrated this in research at UCLA, showing that social rejection activates the brain's anterior cingulate cortex, the same region involved in physical injury. In simple terms, being ignored hurts because your brain interprets it as danger. Humans evolved in tribes. Isolation historically meant death, so your nervous system treats loneliness as a biological emergency, at first. But the brain has another function that's even more powerful than pain detection: adaptation. If a threat persists long enough and you cannot escape it, the nervous system slowly reduces the alarm signal, not because the danger disappeared, but because staying in constant distress would destroy your ability to function. So your mind recalibrates. The pain dulls, the ache softens, and eventually loneliness stops hurting the way it used to. This is where many people believe they've healed. They say things like, "I've just learned to enjoy being alone." But something subtle has changed inside the system. The attachment circuitry has shifted. Your brain begins reinforcing a new pattern. Avoidance is safer than connection. Psychologists call this an avoidance reinforcement loop. Each time you withdraw from social risk, awkward conversations, vulnerability, potential rejection, your nervous system experiences relief. Relief feels like safety. Safety feels like control, and control begins to look like independence. But relief is not the same as resolution. Imagine a smoke alarm in your house that goes off every time something burns in the kitchen. Eventually, if it keeps triggering, you might remove the batteries just to stop the noise. The silence afterward feels peaceful, but the fire risk never changed. This is where it turns. When loneliness stops hurting, it often means your emotional system has stopped expecting connection, and expectation is everything. The human attachment system is predictive. It builds internal models about what relationships will be like based on past experience. If repeated attempts at connection resulted in rejection, dismissal, or emotional distance, your brain quietly rewrites its expectations. It begins to assume something dangerous. Connection probably won't work. So the mind adapts by lowering the desire for it. This is not strength, it's protective conditioning. You stop reaching out, you stop initiating conversations, you stop imagining closeness. Not consciously, your nervous system simply stops generating the urge. This is why the loneliness feels quieter. Your brain has turned down the volume, and from the outside, the behavior looks stable. You focus on work, you keep routines, you function normally. But under the surface, a deeper psychological mechanism is operating: psychological identity preservation bias. The mind would rather believe I prefer being alone than confront the possibility I stopped believing anyone would stay. That shift protects the ego from rejection, but it comes with a cost most people never notice. Because once loneliness becomes normalized, something else begins to change: your perception of other people. You start interpreting social opportunities differently. Invitations feel exhausting, conversations feel performative, emotional closeness starts to look complicated. The nervous system categorizes connection as a potential threat to stability, so the avoidance loop strengthens. You decline invitations, you delay messages, you choose isolation over uncertainty. And each time you do, the brain receives confirmation. See, being alone is easier. This is the part no one warns you about. The brain is not trying to make you happy. It's trying to keep you safe based on past data. If past data says closeness equals pain, your nervous system will quietly steer you away from it. Even when part of you still wants connection, even when another part of you feels the emptiness. That contradiction is what creates the strange emotional numbness many people mistake for maturity. You're not desperate for people anymore, but you're not fulfilled either. You exist in a kind of emotional neutral, functional, stable, quiet. But there's a deeper psychological shift happening beneath that quiet. The attachment system is slowly shutting down its signals. Psychologist John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, described this as deactivation, a defensive process where the mind suppresses attachment needs in order to avoid anticipated rejection. In other words, the brain hides its own hunger, not because the need disappeared, but because acknowledging the need feels dangerous. So the system goes offline. And when that happens long enough, something subtle begins to distort your self-perception. You start believing the narrative, I'm just someone who likes being alone. But if that were completely true, there wouldn't be a quiet tension in your chest when you see other people connecting. There wouldn't be a subtle heaviness after long periods of isolation. There wouldn't be that strange moment late at night when the silence feels louder than usual. Your mind calls it independence. Your nervous system knows it's something else. And here's the destabilizing truth. When loneliness stops hurting, it often means the part of you that expected love has gone dormant. Not dead, dormant. But dormancy has consequences, because when you stop expecting connection, you also stop recognizing it when it appears. Opportunities for relationships pass by unnoticed. Signals from others go unreciprocated. Potential friendships fade before they even begin. Not because people rejected you, but because your nervous system filtered them out. This is where it becomes self-sabotage. The very defense designed to protect you from loneliness slowly guarantees it. And the longer this pattern runs, the more it shapes your identity. You become the reliable one who doesn't need anyone, the quiet observer in social groups, the person who listens more than they speak. From the outside, this can even look emotionally intelligent, but internally, the attachment system is still waiting, still watching, still measuring the risk of connection. And the longer it stays dormant, the harder it becomes to reactivate, because the brain begins treating isolation as baseline reality. Relationships start to feel foreign, intimacy feels unpredictable, trust feels like exposure. Not because you're incapable of connection, but because the nervous system has spent years learning to live without it. And here's the predictive part most people don't want to hear. If this pattern continues unchanged, the loneliness will not disappear. It will simply become invisible, a background condition of life. You'll function, you'll achieve things, you'll fill your time, but something essential will remain quietly unfulfilled, not loudly painful, just missing. And this brings us back to the question from the beginning. Why does loneliness suddenly feel normal? Because the mind has decided that expecting connection is more dangerous than living without it, so it silences the signal. But silence is not healing, it's adaptation. And adaptation is reversible only once you recognize what the quiet actually means. Loneliness stopping its pain signal is not the end of the problem. It's the moment the system begins hiding it. Which raises a more uncomfortable question most people avoid asking themselves. If your loneliness no longer hurts, what exactly did your mind have to shut down to make that possible? That question sits at the center of nearly every pattern we explore here: how the mind protects identity, how the nervous system rewires expectations, and how avoidance quietly reshapes a life. And once you begin noticing these patterns, it becomes very difficult to stop seeing them.